Thank you very much for watching this recorded presentation on Yoshino wood, its history and utilization. My name is Yutaka Goto, and on behalf of Yamato Forest Management Association, I would like to give you a presentation on the timbers that are produced in this Yoshino area in Japan. The recording is split into 3 parts, and the first recording part will touch upon the brief introduction of myself, who I am, and what is Yoshino wood. Then the second recording will talk about the history of Yoshino forestry. And the last part of the recording will touch upon the characteristics of Yoshino wood in the 21st century, and it will be finally summarized in some, So, self-introduction, who I am. Once again, my name is Yutaka Goto. I am a researcher and teacher at the Department of Architecture and Civil Engineering in Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden. And my teaching and researching topics are timber engineering on wood-based materials and timber constructions, and building physics on building envelope, indoor comfort, energy efficiency, and heat and moisture simulation. In addition to these 2 main pillars of my expertise, I also deal with life cycle assessment, wood science, forestry, and architectural design. Why am I giving this recorded presentation? That is because I come from Nara Prefecture in Japan, and the Yoshino area is actually in Nara Prefecture. And yeah, as a wood engineer, wood researcher in Europe, I am very happy to represent Yamato Forestry Management Association for giving this presentation to you. So what is Yoshino wood? Probably many of you haven't heard of Yoshino wood, this name, this word, up until today. First of all, I would like to show you where Yoshino is. Yeah, here is the map of Japan. In the central part of Japan, and in the central part of there, we have Kawakami village and Higashi Yoshino village and Kurotaki village. And combining those 3 villages, we call it Yoshino area. The total area of the 3 villages is about 390 square kilometers, and altitude of this area ranges from 240 to 1,400 meter high, and the population of the 3 villages is about 3,000 people as of the beginning of 2021. So this is where Yoshino is located. It is a rural area in the middle of mountains, and most of it is covered with forest. And it has a very long history of organized forestry operation, which started in the 18th century. And it is one of the most prestigious timber production sites in Japan until today. They are very well known actually within Japan for the extremely high quality of timbers that they produce in this region. Here, I show you the climate of Yoshino. The temperature in the summertime is not too high, actually, and the temperature in the wintertime is also not too low, and it rains a lot throughout the year, and this creates a super ideal climatic condition for the forest growth, actually. Yeah, this is one impression from the forest in Yoshino. And this is a picture from a local timber market in the Yoshino area. These are cypress boughs, which are extremely wide and thick and long with no big deficits like knots. And this is the actual quality that you can expect from the timbers from Yoshino. The planted trees have been super carefully maintained by the owners and the foresters since more than 300 years until today. About 70 to 80% of the trees are sugi, Japanese cedar, and the rest of it is hinoki, Japanese cypress. They were planted initially super dense, about 10,000 seedlings per 1 hectare, which is, let's say 1 seedling per 1 square meter. And they have gone through very careful pruning and thinning processes. And after the period of 300 years, originally it was 10,000 seedlings, but only 100 trees are left, and they are still standing there today. I mean, it's not only 1 hectare that we're talking about. This is just a calculation of the density. The trees have very straight grain, very thin annual ring width, which is about 2 millimeters, and even thickness and no knots over the length of the trunk, which can measure up to 7 or even 8 meters, actually. And this is why we say the quality of the timbers from Yoshino is extremely high. Here, I show you the comparison of modulus of elasticity between ordinary cedar and Yoshino cedar. Modulus of elasticity represents the stiffness of the material. So the higher it is, the stiffer the material is. And as you can see clearly, Yoshino cedar is much stiffer than other ordinary cedars. And this is due to the material property, thanks to the forest operation and the climate. So in this section, I would like to introduce the history of Yoshino forestry. So yes, on this slide, I am showing you the timeline of the classical to feudal time of Japan from around 6th century to the beginning of 18th century. And I categorized several highlighted historical events into 3 groups: background, ordinary forests, and Yoshino forest. Around the 6th century, the Yamato dynasty unified Japan, and the first capitals were built around Nara, actually, and it created a large demand for construction materials in the region around Nara. However, what was happening in Yoshino was this. Yoshino was regarded as a sacred area, actually, in the classical time of Japan. And also the transportation of the lumbers from Yoshino to other regions was difficult due to its geography. So the natural forest in Yoshino was left more or less untouched, although it was pretty close to the capitals. As the time evolves, Japan saw the economic growth and increase of population. The population was about 8 million around the 8th century, and it grew up to about 30 million people in the beginning of 18th century, actually. And it naturally resulted in the growing demand for large dimension timbers for temples, ordinary houses, and so on. And due to that, this was happening in the ordinary forests. Felling of natural forests and gradual exploitation of large dimension trees. Towards the beginning of the early modern time of Japan, there was a very extensive deforestation and rapid balding of mountains across Japan, and this became a very serious social issue. What was happening in the meantime in Yoshino is the following. There was a very small-scale local forest-based economy around Yoshino. People produced timbers, wooden goods, barrels, papers, charcoals, and so on. But I mean, they didn't really exploit the natural resources then. And as the time evolves, the shipping of lumbers from Yoshino became possible thanks to the investment in new infrastructure along the river from Yoshino down to the ocean. And it resulted in some small-scale forestry organized by the local people as a part of the cycle of slash and barn agriculture in communal local forests around Yoshino. So I would like to elaborate a little bit on the infrastructure for the logistics of lumbars. This shows the people flushing down the lumbars along the river. This is the river, how it looks today. Yoshino River is the name. And until the middle age of Japan, they didn't really put a lot of investment into the civil works along the river because some parts of the river was very difficult to do the construction works. And it requires very high maintenance every year. So they didn't put a lot of effort there, but they noticed that the flushing down of the lumbars could be profitable for the local economy in Yoshino. So although they knew that it would cost a lot, they prioritized the efficient logistics of their lumbars to urban regions, and they flushed down various dimensions of lumbars. And because it is the flushing down on the water, it kept the damage to the lumbars to the minimum, which was quite beneficial. And this resulted in a significant contribution to the Yoshino forest economy. Just to show you how the logistics was connected. This is the Yoshino area, and the Yoshino River runs through the forests, mountains down to this ocean. This area is called Wakayama. It was a small local economy growing there, and the lumbars were further transported on the ocean, actually, from Wakayama to Osaka, which had a huge economic growth back then. So this is how it was connected, how Yoshino was connected to the more economically active areas close by. Regarding the exploitation of natural trees in natural forests, I want to highlight another thing here too. Towards the beginning of the early modern age of Japan, the architecture style evolved as the Japanese culture matured, and this resulted in a more diverse demands in the construction industry. In the picture on the left, you can see a very old temple, which is consisting of very thick timbers. I mean, those thick pillars are supporting the roof of a temple building structure. And this was the super typical architecture style in the old days. But as people faced the exploitation of forest, the scarcity of the large dimensional natural trees, they also evolved the architectural style into such a style which requires smaller dimension of timbers. And actually it gives a more refined impression of the architectural design. So the demand in the architect construction market also changed. To summarize it, structures with small dimension timbers were appearing in addition to the traditional large dimension timber structures. And this also influenced the Yoshino forest operation to some extent. And I will talk about it in the next slide. So let's move on to the early modern time of Japan from 18th century to 19th century. Back then, Japan was having this policy of closed country. To be more precise, from the middle of 17th century to the middle of 19th century, Japan limited the trading with foreign countries to the minimum. It really didn't do much of trading with other countries, and it resulted in the unique development of the local culture and economy. One example that I want to cite here is this one. The encouragement on the sake production to increase the rice production and boost the national economy, which was enacted in the middle of 18th century by one of the famous shoguns. What was happening in the ordinary forests? Because people became aware that they cut down too many trees in the natural forest, So they started protecting deep forest natural woods, actually, and local laws encouraged the people, citizens, to plant new trees and grow them to secure the forest supply. In the meantime, there was a very strict communal control on the utilization of local satoyama. Satoyama means something like forest areas right next to residential quarters. And because of these two things, the utilization of timbers was very much limited, actually, from ordinary forests. However, what was happening in Yoshino was different. The forest in Yoshino was owned not by the local lord, but by the Edo shogunate, which is something like a central government of Japan back then. And it allowed some economic activities in Yoshino. And therefore, it was possible to operate some organized planting and forest management locally. The planting and forest management in the beginning of 18th century was characterized by short felling cycle in many cases to supply lumbers with smaller dimensions because the demand from the market was different. As I showed you in the previous slide, smaller dimension lumbers were more demanded in the construction industry. So in the beginning of the forest operation, like man-made forest operation of Yoshino, they didn't have the idea to have it as a very long felling cycle. However, as the time evolves, they saw the increase in the demand for thicker cedar lumbers, and this resulted in the longer felling cycle operation of the forest. Here I come back to this funny example of the local economy boosting. This sake production resulted in the increase of the demand for thicker cedar lumbers. But how did it happen? This is why. This is a picture showing the production of barrels in Yoshino, the barrels for the transportation of sake. And it was said that thick lumbers with 80 years were thought to be the best quality to produce the barrels for sake, and this directly increased the profitability in the forest management of Yoshino. So it was a big contributor for the Yoshino forestry to grow larger and run into the operation with a longer felling cycle. As a result, the business model and forest management model matured as a system towards the beginning of 19th century. What was the operation and business model? It is characterized by the very dense plantation, which is still continuing until today, and frequent thinning with the cycle span of 10 to 20 years, and long felling cycle of 300 years. It is also characterized by the small management unit, which is like one forester takes care of only 15 hectares, which is a very much segmented way of forest management. And the forest owners and the merchants established the value chain logistics from the forest to the lumber markets in Wakayama and Osaka. And here I want to show you some example of how the value chain was established. These are the stamps to certify the source of lumber from Yoshino. I mean, different stamps represent different forest owners. And even back then, in the early modern time of Japan, the forest owners was aware of the branding, the importance of the branding of their lumbers, and they stamped their lumbers to certify that it comes from Yoshino and it has an extremely high quality. And the stamp is kept up until at least to the lumber market to not lose the value of it by losing the certificate from the source, right? And even today, those stamps are used in the current timber trading in that region, actually. So this is the overview of what was happening in Yoshino Forest up until the beginning of 19th century. And what happened afterwards will be mentioned very briefly in the next section of the recording. So in this section, I would like to talk a little bit more about the material characteristics of Yoshino wood from a bit more scientific perspectives. About the mechanical property of Yoshino wood. These pictures are showing the cedar lumbars from Yoshino and the sawing process of it. As I have already mentioned in the previous section, the trees have very straight grain, very thin annual ring width, and even thickness and no knots over the length of the trunk. And this results in a very preferable mechanical property of wood. And this chart is showing the comparison among different wood samples: Yoshino cedar, ordinary cedar, and Douglas fir. The chart is plotting the modulus of elasticity of those samples against modulus of rupture, which basically represents the strength of the material. If we look at the red circle and blue triangle, this is a comparison between Yoshino cedar and ordinary cedar. We can clearly see that the Yoshino cedar has much higher better mechanical properties. And if we compare the red square and blue square, that's the comparison between Yoshino cedar and Douglas fir. This is the distribution of the plots. The plots of the Douglas fir is a little bit more diverse than the Yoshino cedar. And yeah, if we take the average of each, maybe we can say that the mechanical properties of the two wood types are rather similar. And this high strength or preferable mechanical properties of Yoshino cedar comes from its high density and less cross grains thanks to the very straight grain and less knots. Researchers in Nara conducted the durability test of Yoshino wood as well. They put the wood samples into the soil and measured the natural durability of those wood, and they used different types of wood: Yoshino cedar sapwood, Yoshino cedar hardwood, Yoshino cypress sapwood, Yoshino cypress hardwood, and European spruce hardwood and European Scots pine hardwood. And from the testing, they found that the durability of Yoshino cedar hardwood was medium and that of Yoshino cypress hardwood was high, while other wood types showed low durability. They conducted a laboratory test as well by letting two types of fungus eat the wood specimens, the same set of wood types, and they got the same conclusion from this test as the field test. So the Yoshino cedar hardwood showed medium durability, and Yoshino cypress hardwood showed high durability, while others showed low durability. So from these tests, we can say that the durability of Yoshino wood, especially the hardwood of the cedar, cypress, both the Yoshino wood have a good durability performance. Okay, so in this last section, I would like to discuss about the utilization of Yoshino wood in the current world and in the future. So sustainability and Yoshino forestry is the focus of the discussion. As I have reviewed in the previous section, the growth of Yoshino forestry economy was quite extensive towards the modern time of Japan. However, the industrialization of Japan changed the forestry economy significantly. And the profitability of the Yoshino forestry has been declining quite significantly over the years. And now we need a new operation model in order to maintain the sustainability function of Yoshino forestry. But what kind of sustainability are we talking about? Here, I want to cite the common triple bottom line model of sustainability: environmental, economic, and social sustainability. In terms of environmental sustainability, Yoshino forest can contribute to the global climate mitigation by carbon storage and carbon sink by the forest growth itself. And it also contributes very significantly to the local ecosystem. In terms of economy, it creates local value added by producing those very high quality timbers. And because of the universal quality of those timbers, the value chain can extend longer and broader even outside Japan. And yeah, this broad and long value chain can be also an important aspect in terms of economic sustainability of Yoshino forest. And the last point, social sustainability, concerns the local safety, because the forest prevents the landslides in the mountains, and it creates local employment, which is also very, very important. And the forestry culture, which evolved over the past hundreds of years, also has a very high quality, unique value in it, not only locally, but also it is a universal cultural value that it shows actually. So we want to maintain the culture of it as well. If we look at different items from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, the Yoshino forestry can concern different items that are shown here. What is important for us to keep in mind is that we have to keep the cycle of regeneration of Yoshino forest. There are very old trees, and we need to utilize those old trees by felling and using in a sustainable way. And when doing so, we have to actually plant new trees to ensure that there will be new generations of trees. And this cycle of regeneration of forest management is really necessary. And in order to do it, we have to find new utilizations, new ways to use the timbers from Yoshino. And in this last slide, I want to share some examples, some efforts for development of new applications of Yoshino wood. There was a recent study by researchers in Nara. They looked at the evaluation of impression of Yoshino cedar and its suitability for interior use. They asked many participants of the survey about the suitability of the impression of different wood types, which is shown here, for different locations, different places in a built environment. So such a study can give it some sort of an indication of where is a suitable place for the Yoshino cedar to be placed. There was another study by another research group in Nara. They noticed that the material property of Yoshino cedar was rather similar to those European softwood, which was used for the production of violins. And they made some prototypes of violins with Yoshino cedar, and they tested the acoustic spatial radiation characteristics of those Yoshino violin. And in this study, they could observe that the spatial radiation characteristics by those Yoshino cedar violins were comparable to those European softwood violins. So they could show that the acoustic performance of the violin could be as good. And now they are trying to they are trying to scale up the production of the Yoshino cedar violins actually. And of course, there are rooms for development for different furniture design, interior design, utilization of Yoshino wood. So there are several efforts happening, and yeah, we have to keep looking for new opportunities to use the material with values, with new values in it. Okay, now I want to summarize my whole presentation. Yoshino in Japan is a region with a truly unique man-made forest history of more than 300 years. Yoshino wood has desirable material properties and universal aesthetical quality thanks to the unique forest operation and the local climate. And in order to maintain the sustainability function of the forest operation for both global and local contexts, a new operation and utilization model is needed. So this is why those professionals from NARA are trying to approach the global market. And yeah, this is basically why I was requested by Yamato Forest Management Association to give overview of what Yoshino is and what Yoshino wood is. I want to acknowledge Professor Eiji Izumi for the extensive inputs about the history of Yoshino Forest, and also Mr. Hajime Nishiura for the pictures, and also the staff of Nara Prefecture Office for some inputs to the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me to this email address. And on behalf of Yamato Forest Management Association, I would like to thank you all very much for your participation. Thank you and goodbye.